Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts About the 40K Universe. I am your host, Gershwan, and you were watching One Mind Syndicate. Today we continue talking about the Traitor Primarchs and their origins as we get into Magnus. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. We post Warhammer 40K lore videos every single day. And if you have any suggestions, please comment down below. But with that said, let's get into 40 facts on the origins of Magnus the Red. When the young Primarch, Magnus the Red, was scattered across the stars, he landed on the planet of Prospero. Chosen by its settlers for the planet's isolated position, although it still remained far closer to Terra than many other human colonies settled around the dark age of technology, the civilized world of Prospero had only a few redeemable qualities. It possessed no independent resources, little contact with any outsider, and only a few sources of nourishment. The only reason for planting a colony there was because it was a very good place to hide, and thus became a large community of psychically talented and often physically mutated humans who would find no safety elsewhere in the galaxy. Although the planet protected the settlers from those that wished to see them dead, the strong psychic presence of the population attracted the rare but deadly warp entities known as Psychnuans. Resembling huge, spiny wasps, these warp insects were drawn to the souls of the unprotected or badly injured psychers. They then would lay their eggs inside the brains of the novice psychers and watch their progeny eat away at the psycher's brain. This Psychnuan plague persisted until the civilization of Prospero collapsed and the survivors fled to the city of Tisca. For thousands of Terran years, the people of Tisca endured, while all they had built in the millennia since leaving Terra fell to dust. The surface of Prospero was dotted with the remains of dead culture. Empty cities were overgrown with forests and vines, the palaces of their kings overrun with wild beasts. Those that remained survived by salvaging knowledge and equipment. They constructed techno-psychic arrays and substantial energy sources, which then allowed them to build giant hydroponic gardens deep in the caverns of the mountain ranges. They survived the Psychnuan threat by further developing the very psychic powers that made them so vulnerable. The Psychnuans were drawn to Tisca in their thousands, but the survivors were able to train their most gifted psychers to use their minds to erect invisible barriers of pure thought. They were known as kin shields. They were primitive, bombastic powers compared to the subtle arts later employed by the Thousand Sons, but they kept the creatures at bay. Even so, the practitioners of the mysteries remain locked in their limited understanding of the Immaterium's power. That is until the arrival of the Primarch. When Magnus fell from the sky, he landed on the central plaza of Tisca. It is said that the impact he had on the people of Prospero was as great as the gestation capsule's impact upon the planet's crust. The little enclave took in the Primarch, known as the Tiscan Commune. It was a place rooted in tradition, but they had very little skills in wielding the power known as ether. Of course, they did not know it by that name, and the power they had, while enough to keep the psych predators at bay, were little more than the enchantments of idiot children. The young Primarch was schooled in the ways of the commune by his tutor, Magistus Amon. He quickly learned everything they had to teach him. Magnus endured Amon's tutorials and sermons regarding the powers of the warp. Amon referred to it as the Great Ocean. His teacher was also kind to him, even after Magnus outstripped him in learning and powers at an early age. Yet Amon warned Magnus of peering too deeply into the ocean's depths. In truth, Magnus had outstripped the learning of Prosperian's greatest scholars within a standard year of his arrival. Their teachings were too dogmatic, too linear, and too limited to the potential of the Primarch's mind. His intellect was superior in every way to those that taught him. Magnus knew that with his teachings, he could be so much more. To increase his understanding of the powerful psychic abilities, Magnus took a walk into the waste of Prospero. True power comes only to those who have fully tested themselves against their greatest fears. Within the commune of Tisca, the Primarch knew no fear, no hunger, no want, and had no drive to push his abilities to their full potential. Magnus needed to be tested to the very limits of his power to see if he even had limits. Out in the wilds, Magnus knew that he would either find the key to fully unlock his powers or die in the attempt. A year after his coming to Prospero, the Primarch walked from the gates of Tisca and marched into the wilderness for nearly 40 solar days. Through his observations, Magnus learned to harness his powerful abilities during this long trek. He had already begun his second grimoire when Amon had come upon the young Primarch squatting amongst a carpet of stones fallen from a ruined statue, the remains of Prospero's past. Amon was much moved and began to write poetry about each of the incredible designs and patterns of the scattered stones. Magnus believed that there were hidden designs amongst the shards of rock there, the workings of the universe laid bare. Together, Amon and Magnus returned home, where he read his poetry, and the Primarch showed the masters of Tisca the workings in his grimoire. So amazed were they that they joined Magnus on a pilgrimage back to the cliff, where the remains of the fallen statues were located. The shards were just as he had described them. The masters of Tisca were overcome with emotion, filling their own grimoires with fantastical writing. Some wrote about the triangles, others described the circles, while yet others concentrated all their attention on the glittering spectrums of color stones. Temporarily lax in their mental discipline, the Psychnuans were drawn to the large commune of Psychers, and in the thousands they came, blackening the sky with their numbers as they descended like a plague from ancient times. They swarmed from their darkened caves, organically shifting clouds of deadly clades, the relentless buzzing of thousands of crystalline wings representing the sound of inevitable doom. The male swarmed in, a hurricane of snapping mandibles and tearing claws, and 50 men died in the time it took to draw breath. Behind the males came the females, engorged with clutch after clutch of immaterial eggs. Their furious reproductive hunger was insatiable, and dozens of the Primarch's friends fell to their knees in horror as they felt the Psychnuan eggs take root in their brains. The beasts swirled around them, battering the Prosperians with psychic thrusts, scrambling at their mental barriers to seed their minds with eggs, and only the strongest of them remained. Amon and the 8 of the psychic masters of Tisca stood with the Primarch. Magnus knew this was what he had been seeking all along, the true test of his abilities. Magnus would see if he was the master of his powers, or was found wanting. As the Psychnuans came to the Prosperian defenders again, something magnificent happened. The Primarch felt something move within him, feeling change, as though an immense power had laid within him, dormant and untapped. It surged to life. As Magnus contemplated the moment of his death, raging fires erupted from his hands. The Primarch hurled torrents of flame into the sky, as though he had always known he had such a power. He killed hundreds of Psychnuans with every gesture. Soon the other Tiscan masters displayed hence unknown abilities as well, as walls of flame sprang up at their mental command. Others were able to pluck beasts from the air and dash them on rocks with the powers of their mind. Still other defenders were able to will the vital fluids within the Psychnuans to boil within their exoskeleton. Amon saw images of the future as he cried out words of warning to his fellows, telling them of dangers to come and how they might avoid them. Some of the other defenders sensed the lust within the Psychnuans to plant their psychic seed within the humans, the relentless animal hunger that drove them to feed and propagate. They reached into the minds of the beast and twisted their perceptions so that they became blind to the humans. Coming out victorious from this vicious Psychnuan attack, Magnus and the Masters regrouped and soon set off on a campaign to rid the planet of the Psychnuan threat. After that, the Primarch was elevated to the leader of Prospero. Magnus unified its sometimes squabbling cults of sorcerers and set about rebuilding Prospero's civilization. Tisca, the capital, was transformed into a city of breathtaking beauty. Beautifully designed buildings in the form of pyramids and towers, composed of glass and marble, wide boulevards, paradise-like parks, and a constant, pleasing psychic background, resulted in the immediate bliss for all visitors. This period of peace, prosperity, and psychic well-being reflected on the world's population of powerful psychers, and Prospero became known as a planet of psychically and spiritually beautiful humans. Magnus also set himself the task of consolidating and expanding the Prosperan knowledge of the warp. To further this goal, Magnus built in the center of Tisca a great library within a magnificent pyramid where all of the knowledge the Prosperan gained about both sorcery and the nature of the warp was kept, brushing aside the warnings of his wise teacher Amon about the dangers of delving too deep into the immaterium. Magnus undertook long and far-reaching psychic journeys into the furthest reaches of the warp. It wouldn't be long before he would find the Emperor of Mankind. And those were 40 facts on Magnus the Red, or the origins of Magnus the Red. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, share it with your friends on Facebook, Twitter, whatever social media you guys use. It helps out the channel when you do so. And thank our patrons on Patreon. It's because of them that we can do these videos. Link in the description if you guys want to support us. It's $1 a month. That dollar helps us create more videos and also contributes to the giveaways, which, by the way, if you check out our 40 facts on the horrible realities of an Imperial assassin, you can find a giveaway that we're doing right now. Magnus the Red is one of those Primarchs that has like really influential lore, and you can kind of see what is going to happen because of where he was born later on within the Great Crusade, but we'll get to that. If you guys have suggestions for any other topics of Warhammer 40K, please comment down below, and yeah, I'll talk to you tomorrow. This is Gershwin with One Mind Syndicate signing out.